Hi there, it's Llarold, and today I'm putting out my Vengeance Demon Hunter class guide for Shadowlands patch 9.2. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. I will be making an effort to respond to every question, and while I'm at it, like and subscribe. Alright, let's get right into it. Let's quickly go over the list of class changes to Demon Hunters in patch 9.2. It's extremely short. Blind Faith, the Kyrian legendary, has been capped at 20 stacks, and Sinful Brand can no longer overwrite itself with shorter versions of itself. And that's it. Nothing major. Let's move on to new stuff. We'll start with the Vengeance Demon Hunter tier set bonuses. The 2-piece bonus grants a 10% chance for Immolation Aura damage to generate a soul fragment. This scales linearly with your target count. It adds about 1 fragment every 10 seconds per nearby target. In single target, it's kinda bad. It's okay, it's helpful, but it's really not very good in just pure single target raid fights. In large scale AoE, it's extremely strong, and it will almost certainly cause Spirit Bomb to become the de facto playstyle again. The 4-piece bonus grants you cooldown reduction on Immolation Aura or Fell Devastation. Again, just like the 2-piece, this is pretty uninteresting in single target. It's not terrible, but it's not a huge boost in power either. The increase in Immolation Aura uptime is good, but not great, and the Fell Devastation cooldown reduction will help make the class a little tankier, but not in a way that launches the class to the top of the raid tank tier lists. In Mythic Plus, though, this bonus is very strong, and it changes your playstyle in a big way. The cooldown reduction on Fell Devastation really adds up, and if you're pulling big enough, you can run Feed the Demon for incredible uptime on Demon Spikes. I hate this, to be honest, and I don't know that it'll actually wind up becoming popular again, but it's possible, and it would actually be pretty powerful. If you're a Mythic Plus enthusiast, you're going to want to absolutely get the 4-piece bonus as quickly as you can. I mean, that's true in Raid 2, I guess. It's free real estate. But, you know, barring any unexpected nerfs, you're going to want to wear this set of tier bonuses until next expansion. Next up is the double legendary power. This is being time gated until week 5 of the patch, or the 3rd week that Mythic Raid is open. I hate it. Basically, it works like this. When you complete the campaign quest for that week, you receive a legendary belt that you can wear along with any other legendary in the game. The belt grants you your Covenant's legendary power, so for classes that already have good Covenant legendaries, this is a huge boost in power. Kyrian is the only Vengeance Demon Hunter Covenant worth playing as far as I'm concerned. Blind Faith adds a ton of fury and up to 20% versatility for 20 seconds as a reward for casting Elysian Decree. That is very good. It's a terrific legendary. It's already become really popular in the last half of Shadowlands Mythic Plus Season 2, and I think having constant access to it is only going to cement Kyrian as really the only option for Vengeance Demon Hunter Covenants. There's a possibility that Venthyr could be capable of dealing more single target damage in raid, and that's neat, but it really doesn't have any interesting synergy elsewhere in the kit, and I have my doubts anyway. I think the defensive value just isn't comparable at all. It's incredibly unreliable, based around Dark Glare Boon and its 40% proc chance beating the odds in order to compete with Kyrian. Kyrian's just consistently powerful. Just stick with the blue guys. Now let's move on to Covenants at large. Kyrian's the #1 choice for Vengeance Demon Hunter in Mythic and in raids. Elysian Decree rocks. Everything about Kyrian is perfect for Vengeance Demon Hunters. Necrolord isn't terrible, but it's very inconsistent and too undertuned. Night Fae doesn't really have any synergy. It's fine, it's damage, but that's it. And Venthyr is inconsistent and single target parsing oriented. Easy choice. Kyrian it is. Now let's move on to Soulbinds. Mechanicos is the supreme Soulbind. I would run him pretty much just like that. I think you could consider swapping out Hammer of Genesis and the extra endurance conduit to pick up Soul Steel clamps and an extra potency conduit for single target raid fights only, but I think even then I wouldn't do it. I think I would actually just rather have the extra endurance conduit. Vengeance Demon Hunter potency conduits, they have, you know, 2 pretty decent ones, and then everything after that's pretty weak, whereas endurance conduits are actually pretty good, and let's get onto those Conduits now. Starting with Potency Conduits, Growing Inferno is one of the best Potency Conduits available to any tank. It's certainly the best available to Vengeance Demon Hunters. The extra Immolation Aura uptime granted by the 4-piece bonus only makes it stronger. The Curian Potency Conduit is Repeat Decree, and it's extremely good. That's pretty much it. If you do wind up using a third Potency Conduit, I think Adaptive Armor Fragment is the best remaining option. Vengeance has much better Endurance Conduits. Fel Defender and Viscous Ink are the best Endurance Conduits available to Vengeance Demon Hunters by a pretty wide margin. Fel Defender grants a lot of cooldown reduction on Fel Devastation, which is a major defensive cooldown if you're talented into Demonic, and you should be. Viscous Ink grants a ton of passive spell damage reduction. It's terrific. As for your third Endurance Conduit, Shattered Restoration and Condensed Animosphere are both good options. They're fairly close in value and depend primarily on how much damage you're taking. Condensed Animosphere tends to be a little stronger in raids where damage intake is a little lower and more controlled, whereas Shattered Restoration is better in Mythic Plus, where you can make enormous pulls and take huge bursts of damage. Finally, let's cover Finesse Conduits. Felfire Haste adds a little more mobility onto your main mobility skill. It's a really minor bonus, so I would not go out of your way to take Finesse Conduits, but in Mechanicos Tree you have to take one, and this would be the default pick there. Next up is Legendaries. There are 3 pieces worth discussing here, but I will start by saying that tier set pieces force you not to wear Legendaries in the helm, shoulder, chest, and gloves, and legs slots. You could wear a Legendary in one of those slots, but then you're banking on getting 4 pieces of tier across the other 4, and Vengeance Demon Hunter tends to wind up with Legendaries in the bracers anyways. First up is Fiery Soul. It's one of the best defensive legendaries available to any tank. Basically, this cuts Fiery Brand's cooldown down by at least 30 seconds. This is absolutely the go-to legendary for progression rating, but I'll be honest, it's a little boring. Extremely tanky, terrific, just a little boring. The other raid option is Razalix's Defilement. It's a really powerful damage option that synergizes wonderfully with Curian's Kit and with Blind Faith. If you run Razalix and Blind Faith together, you can get very close to 20-second cooldowns on Elysian Decree, allowing you to maintain near permanent uptime on the massive versatility buff and Fury generation that Blind Faith offers. This rules. It's extremely fun. I don't know how they did it, but Blizzard made pressing Soul Cleave fun. Good job, dudes. Now let's talk about Mythic Plus. Because of all the souls you're going to generate once you have the 2-piece bonus, Spirit Bomb is going to see a huge rise in value. Until that point, and until you have unlocked Double Legendary, I think the best Mythic Plus Legendary is still just going to be Blind Faith, like it was in Season 2. Once you get your hands on those bonuses, though, I think the best Mythic Plus Legendary is Dark Glare Boon. I know it's totally RNG, and I'll be the first to say that basing your defensive cooldowns on RNG procs is annoying and unsafe, but running the Spirit Bomb build massively reduces the number of Soul Cleaves you're going to be able to cast, which ruins the value of the 2 legendaries I just went over before this when I was talking about raid choices. The 4-piece bonus also grants a ton of cooldown reduction on Fel Devastation in AoE, so with Fel Dev being available way more often, you will get a lot more chances to trigger the Dark Glare Boon proc throughout a mythic dungeon. Oh my god, trigger the Dark Glare Boon. That is, what a tongue twister. Anytime you get to trigger a Dark Glare Boon proc, you're going to become insanely tanky for a while. If you manage to string several procs in a row, you basically just become a raid boss for like half a minute, which is pretty nice. Alright, now let's move on to talents. This is a setup I would use for raiding, and prior to picking up tier bonuses, I would use it for Mythic Plus as well. In raids, I don't think the Spirit Bomb build is competitive, even with the new tier bonuses and being able to run Blind Faith along with another legendary, primarily because the 2 best raid legendaries are built around using Soul Cleave, which all runs counter to playing Spirit Bomb. I will also point out that Burning Alive is a good talent if you're tanking in a cleave situation, but Fallout synergizes very nicely with the new 4-piece bonus, so I think it's generally just a better choice now anyways. In Mythic Plus, once you have the new stuff, I think the talent setup you want to use is more along these lines. The only question here is Feed the Demon. I don't love it, and I don't think it's good if you're not mass pulling, but it could become popular because it adds a ton of defensive value when you're making really large pulls. Vengeance Demon Hunter basically has 2 rotations. I'll start with the normal one and go over the Spirit Bomb one second. The normal rotation is very forgiving. Mainly you just want to use Fiery Brand and Elysian Decree as much as you can. Unless you're saving Fell Devastation to mitigate a specific burst damage event, you should be using that about as often as you can too. Beyond that, the class is really about using Immolation Aura on cooldown, but never refreshing it while it's active, generating souls with Fracture, and then consuming them with Soul Cleave. If you're using Razalix's Defilement, you don't want to use Sigil of Flame at all. Sigil of Flame damage is very low, and wasting Elysian Decree cooldown on it, even 1 proc, is bad. You're wasting the legendary you're wearing. Where Spirit Bomb differs from the standard playstyle is how you handle souls. You will need to track souls if you're playing Spirit Bomb. For each Spirit Bomb, you want to have at least 4 soul fragments available when you hit Spirit Bomb. Because the 2-piece randomly generates souls, this can be a little uncontrollable, but the important thing to focus on is making sure you spend all your souls on Spirit Bomb and never any on Soul Cleave. This also means you don't want to let them go over the cap of 5, because then they'll just get automatically consumed and given back to you as healing. Beyond that, it's mostly the same as the standard playstyle. You maintain Immolation Aura without refreshing it, you stay aggressive with Fiery Brand and Fell Devastation, and so on. As for Demon Spikes, it's basically the simplest active mitigation skill in the whole game. You just use it when you're tanking. You know, there's literally nothing else to manage, no resource or anything. Just a cooldown. That's it. Generally speaking, you don't want to overlap Demon Spikes or Fell Devastation's free meta proc or Fiery Brand with each other. If you're running the Fiery Brand Legendary and playing that whole playstyle, the goal is kind of to always have one of those up. Either Fiery Brand or Metamorphosis or Demon Spikes. Just always have something up whenever you're tanking, but generally trying not to overlap them unless you're specifically mitigating a major boss hit. The basic stat priority for Vengeance Demon Hunter is pretty much the same as it always has been. Versatility is the best stat. It makes you tankier. It increases your healing and damage, and that's all great too. You just want as much as you can get. Haste is a great stat too. It increases your demonic spikes uptime and your resource generation, and that's also really good. Mastery is pretty weak and crit's okay, but inconsistent. Ultimately, the most important things to go after are tier set bonuses, item level, then sockets, and then versatility and haste. In terms of notable pieces of gear, most of it's pretty interchangeable. Item level does tend to be more important than stat budget. Lightless Force on both of your weapons is the way to go for dealing damage. Now let's cover trinkets. There are some decent ones from dungeons and raids, and I'll just highlight the best options. Phial of Putrefaction from Plaguefall is a simple single target DPS increase from Mythic Plus. It's totally passive, but very nice. The best defensive trinket from Mythic Plus is Blood Spattered Scale, which is from The Other Side. It's an excellent defensive trinket that still offers a decent chunk of damage output. Both of these 2 trinkets were recently nerfed in an attempt to make other trinket options more desirable, but they didn't buff anything else from Mythic Plus, so I still say these are basically the only 2 from Mythic Plus that are like really top of the charts options. Codex of the First Technique from Tazavesh is actually pretty good, and it is something I think a lot of players will be farming now that Tazavesh is being added to the Mythic Plus dungeon pool in Season 3. The stamina is not great, but the damage reflection effect is pretty good for Mythic Plus and any raid fights where you're consistently tanking, especially if you're taking like a fair number of mobs at a time. Ad fights. There are 2 new trinkets from Sepulchre, the first ones that are okay, the rest are all fairly generic. Pulsating Rift Shard is an active defensive trinket. It takes 3 seconds to go off and has a 1-minute cooldown. It's kind of like Blood Spattered Scale. It does split damage like Blood Spattered Scale. But the 3-second windup and the very thin line that it has make it pretty uncomfortable to use. On a training dummy, I would say it's pretty good defensively, but in actual real-world practice, I have concerns with being able to actually hit the things that you're casting it at. That being said, the 1-minute cooldown is good, so I think this winds up being okay in raids. And maybe okay in Mythic Plus, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes through more changes. It's actually gone through 2 rounds of changes since I started working on these videos, and, well, between the time I started working on them and recorded this audio. I bet it'll go through more by the time I'm done publishing them, but hey, you know, I literally waited on making these videos just because they wouldn't stop changing trinkets. I gotta put them out at some point. All right, Pocket Protoforge is the other decent trinket from Raid. It's very simple. It's just a proc shield trinket. You take damage, it sometimes procs a shield. 1 proc per minute is kind of low. I wouldn't be surprised if that gets buffed. Overall, this is boring but decent. I'll also mention that Elegy of Eternals was giving over 1,000 secondary stat budget permanently. They've nerfed that trinket to be weaker at 287 item level than the Castle Nathria trinket from Mythic Stone Legion Generals. Yeah, not good. Not good, I'm just pointing it out. A lot of people might have pointed it out earlier, you know, prior to the nerf that, oh, this is going to be really good. It sucks now. Although maybe not. Maybe it'll be buffed by the time this video is out. Okay, let's quickly go over a couple of trinkets from Sanctum of Domination that I think will still be good next tier, at least for a little while. Shard of Anhilda's Aegis from the 9 is really strong defensively. It reduces a flat amount of damage from all hits and all dot ticks while it's active. That calculation is done after all damage reduction effects are factored in, which makes this great. The only way this doesn't keep from being used during farm and late into Mythic Plus Season 3 is if it gets nerfed. I expect they will try to do that by cutting the absorb value down. If so, I think it'll still be fairly useful for Vengeance Demon Hunters if you really have to mitigate like a series of hits or dot ticks or whatever, and you layer this along with another cooldown. I think that works really well, probably better than most of the new trinkets. It will depend on how hard it gets nerfed, but if they just cut the value down by 30%, 50%, I think it could still be useful. Weave of Warped Fates has been redesigned to just be a normal cheat death trinket. Unlike the Splintered Heart of Alar from Castle Nathria, it doesn't really do anything except prevent your death. No damage to nearby enemies or allies means that you can't blow up and kill Holy Pallies or Resto Druids now. The item level is a full raid tier higher than the Splintered Heart of Alar, so I guess that makes up for not being able to kill healers. It will probably be the go-to trinket for high-level Mythic Plus for the rest of the expansion, and it should be a must-have for Progression and Sepulchre, the first ones, and for pushing in Mythic Plus Season 3. I realize that Vengeance Demon Hunter gets a built-in cheat death, but you know what's better than 1? 2. As we're heading into the final patch of Shadowlands, Demon Hunter looks like it's going to do pretty well. It's going to play like a brand new class in Mythic Plus, which is very neat. I think it'll wind up being pretty strong in Mythic Plus, although I have some concerns that it'll be a middle-of-the-road option again in Raid. Well, I think that about covers it. If you have any questions about Vengeance Demon Hunters and Shadowlands patch 9.2, ask away. Stay tuned for more Shadowlands content, and thank you for watching. Bye.